Thank you guys so much for joining today. I'm going to start with a quick introduction. My name is Noor. I'm head of growth at BAF, Blockchain Acceleration Foundation. Some quick background about our org. We're a nonprofit that starts university accredited courses around blockchain development. We build projects, we connect our members to opportunities in the space, and we're now a DAO that is governed by our affiliated university blockchain clubs. And a couple of them are present with us today. Akil is actually leading the blockchain club at NYU, and this is the first meetup that we organize with them. So super happy about that. For context, BAF basically does these weekly meetups, either on Twitter Space or Zoom if it's a technical workshop, and they're always co-organized with students. So we want these events to be centered around topics that students are interested in and to be by students for students. So yeah, we're super thankful for the funding we got from our sponsors and partners, mainly Algorand Foundation, Protocol Labs, Ethereum Foundation. You can learn all about us on our website, on our Twitter account. And super happy to organize this week's meetup with Akil from NYU and John from UMA to learn about optimistic DAOs. And I will let Akil take it from here. Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here. First time hosting an AMA representing NYU blockchain, so should be fun. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Akhil. I'm the vice president of NYU Blockchain and FinTech, and also I'm a DeFi analyst at Polygon. It's great to be here with John. So Universal Market Access, or UMA for short, was co-founded by Hart Lembor and Allison Liu. They're both ex-Goldman, and they released the UMA white paper in around December 2018, and it's only been, uphill from there. We're going to hear a lot more about this as we're joined by John Shutt, a senior engineer at UMA. It's great to have you here, John.
Yeah, excited to have this chat.
That's awesome. So, how for starters, how did you get into the crypto Wild West? I mean, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
I studied creative writing in college, and I was coming up near the end of my senior year, and I was like, oh no, I studied creative writing in college. I need to learn a trade. So I started just learning full stack web development. And I'd also followed a lot of cypherpunk mailing list type things and just on Slashdot, but commenting without too much technical skill besides installing Linux and being like, ooh, I've got Linux now. So I kind of got tuned into Bitcoin pretty early, and bought some on Mt. Gox and was day trading on there. And some of my earliest programming projects after teaching myself web development and API development was kind of in that same space. I built an API client for local Bitcoins back in 2013, which was kind of cool because the reward that they were giving for people building integrations was we'll give you $100 in Bitcoin, which was 2 Bitcoin. So I got that, and then Bitcoin was only $50 back then, and so I forgot about it. So that was the only Bitcoin that made it until the present day when they were here's your password reset on local Bitcoins. If you want to log in, please update to a stronger password. And I saw I had 2 Bitcoins there and was very thrilled. But that was kind of the beginning of it. I was just really interested in the privacy and decentralization aspects of it. I was really into the idea of Bitcoin as digital cash. I think even from the early days, it was clear that there were some hurdles that are still basically the same hurdles that stop it from really working that way, like the price volatility. So the difficulty of pricing items in that, transaction UX, delayed transaction settlement. So anyway, I followed Ethereum a little bit when it came out. Was just doing web development and doing some encrypted messaging work for journalists and their sources. So running a secure drop server where it's a physical server where you can get encrypted leaks and then not know who your source is. It's all just through a Tor onion service. That was super cool. And I switched full-time to smart contract development in 2017, something like that. Started doing that freelance, worked at Ernst & Young for a couple of years doing smart contract development there, and then made the jump to UMA in 2020.
That's quite a journey, honestly. Starting out as a creative writer and then ending up at as an engineer at a decentralized protocol. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, what is UMA? Like, what is the product market fit? What is it solving? Could you just, explain it to people who might not know what UMA is?
Yeah, so UMA is an optimistic oracle. So we can deliver any kind of external data to a smart contract, which could be data about the real world. It could be data about something that's going on some other chain. So cross-chain communication is one application. It could also just be like off-chain computation, where you have something that's really expensive or difficult to run in a Solidity contract, but it's extremely easy to calculate what the actual answer is. If you can push that calculation off chain, there's huge advantages there. And the basic flow is it's totally open and decentralized for any kind of proposal. So anybody can request a piece of data that like follows one of the identifiers that's been defined, and you can add more if none of them suit your needs. Anybody can propose an answer and post a bond with that. And then there's a challenge window where anybody can dispute that answer and also post a bond. And if an answer gets disputed, it escalates to a vote of all the UMA token holders. And you basically have a secret commitment phase where people read the identifier, they look at the state of the actual world, including whatever other information they need to find online or on different chains, and they submit what they think is the right answer. And it's sealed at first. And then there's a reveal period where people reveal their votes and you find out what the majority thinks like the actual answer was. And your incentives there as a voter are to defend the value of the UMA tokens that give your vote weight. So if UMA starts being unreliable, then your UMA tokens crash in value. So you're basically incentivized to just deliver the truth. And you can't just copy somebody else's work because you don't really know what anybody else is voting. Like people talk about it online because a lot of the disputes that actually happen are edge cases. So people are kind of making their case and evaluating the facts. But in reality, you can't just like look on chain and see like, oh, this is the majority vote right now. I'll just vote with the majority and get some voting rewards. And that's kind of a key part of it too. Like if you participate and you vote correctly, you get pretty good voting rewards. I think the APY is like 40% or something, a work to earn model. But from that, you have this decentralized truth machine that lets you build all kinds of cool stuff. And when we first started out, it was really focused around synthetic assets and these kind of financial use cases. But the Oracle is so flexible that a lot of the newer focuses are on like building protocols on top of the Oracle, with a cross being one example. It's just a cross-chain bridge that's focused on rollups. Another contract that I wrote that is now fully audited and about ready for public consumption allows for optimistic DAO governance. We have insurance protocols that are using us. We have prediction markets using us. It's a really like very open system. And because it's so flexible, you can really get creative with it. And I think the long-term vision is to be this secure, decentralized data provider for any kind of data to smart contracts on, for now, any EVM chain. So we're launching on a whole lot of different chains. So that's the long spiel, just any data your smart contract needs, we can deliver it.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. And I mean, the other, I guess, more common oracles that we've seen, especially in DeFi, are Chainlink oracles, right? Everyone from derivative protocols to like DEXs use them for real world prices and so on. So obviously, from an architectural standpoint, optimistic oracles are very different from Chainlink oracles. But how do they differ in utility? I mean, could you elaborate a little bit more on like difference between Chainlink and optimistic oracles?
Yeah, for sure. So Chainlink oracles are price feed style oracles where you try to verify correctness in advance. And there's a few other competitors that go directly head to head with Chainlink in this area. But the contrast to the UMA model is UMA does have this challenge window. So you have a delay before your finalized settlement. And I can get into some ways that you can still get like instant resolution as far as your user experience goes, but like somebody has to wait until the final answer comes in. Price feed oracles don't really work that way. You get your answer faster. It's not immediate. You still have to request and then wait for a response. And there might be some extra steps to verify that the price feed itself isn't like messed up in some way. So if you're using a Chainlink Oracle to secure huge amounts of value, you probably have some additional safeguards, like maybe you're double checking with Uniswap or something. One consequence of the price feed model is that you're only as secure as this kind of consensus mechanism before the price gets pushed on chain. There's no recourse if the price that's pushed on chain is actually wrong or just unreasonable in some way. And so there are edge cases where that can break down, and you could sort of see that with the UST price feed, where there were a few protocols that were drained because the UST price feed stopped delivering prices below a certain price. So there was kind of like it was meant as a safeguard of like a circuit breaker of like, well, UST will never drop below like this amount of cents or something. And in reality, it did, the actual price of UST. And so some protocols had extra safeguards to kind of pause whatever lending market or anything else was relying on that feed. Others didn't. The ones that didn't got drained. But another part of that too is you have like bespoke pieces of data that are really hard to do under this model because it's not cost effective to get a network of nodes that are all verifying that price. Like ETHUSD, that's a super valuable price feed. You can probably make that economically sustainable. And I believe that's one of the price feeds that Chainlink has that is economically sustainable, that the fees that people pay to access that price on a continuous basis are enough to actually pay the node operators without subsidies from like Chainlink itself. But that's not true for a lot of things. So, if you wanted to build a new protocol and it has some kind of complex aspect to it, you might need a lot of nodes that are all reaching consensus on various aspects of it, like cross-chain bridging being an example. Like it's a kind of a complicated thing that the across identifier is doing in UMA's system, and it's also securing a huge amount of money. If that gets attacked successfully, then you lose a lot. So you would need to like pay a lot of node operators a good amount of fees, and it might be hard to find them. And then for other things like a KPI option, like a token that has a variable payout based on some on-chain or off-chain parameter, that KPI option might only be worth a few $1,000,000. I say like only, but like the payout, the money at risk is a few $1,000,000. And you're only going to need this price like once, really, when you're settling the contract. That doesn't work at all with like a price feed style Oracle because you're not getting a continuous price. You really only want it once. The amount of money at stake isn't enough to really justify getting a whole node network to verify this piece of data. But with an optimistic Oracle, it's fine because you only need one honest participant basically to deliver that. Like somebody to look at the chain, say like, oh, the TVL was this, and they propose the correct payout based on that TVL, and they're not disputed, or just like one honest disputer to stop a bad proposal. So you can do all these bespoke things, and you can have kind of lower payouts where most of the payouts are just bonds that the proposers and disputers are posting. So it's like a game between them in between. So it's really great for that. And one other thing I should say about the system, because of those bonds, disputes are extremely rare. It almost never happens. The incentives are in place that people do propose the correct answer. Like there's no point to propose an incorrect answer because you will lose a bond.
Got it. So would you say that for, I don't know, let's say a derivatives protocol that requires a constant source of price, like they would opt more for a price feed Oracle than an optimistic Oracle, correct? Just more.
They might, but I will say what I was mentioning earlier, that you could have finality from a user experience perspective immediately with UMA's Oracle, and actually theoretically faster than a price feed Oracle. So I'll take Across as an example. What you basically have to do is somebody has to put their own money at risk, like behind the answer, that fully ensures whatever the answer is and whatever the consequences are. So with Across, maybe you're sending $1 million in ETH from Arbitrum to Optimism. And what happens there is a relayer on Optimism just advances you $1 million. So you make the deposit on Arbitrum, somebody else, some third party, not UMA itself or Across itself, they just give you $1 million. and then they go to a pot of passive liquidity and say like, hey, I delivered the $1 million, I calculated fees correctly, I paid everything out, please pay me, my refund plus like my cut of the fees. And so that person who did the relay is going to have to wait a couple of hours for people to challenge whatever their claim was. But for the user, they get it immediately. So if you could build a system with a derivatives protocol where maybe there's like a liquidation that happens, I don't know, like basically somebody has to front all of the money themselves, take that large amount of risk to secure the total value that's at risk from their action, and then they wait for settlement. But other people could get settlement faster. So it really depends on what you mean by a derivatives protocol too, or like how it's meant to be functioning. But it is possible to build like a fast settlement system using UMA. But you have to kind of think about it differently, and you have to figure out who is that person that's providing that fully insured piece of data to make sure that the system can't be exploited.
All right, yeah, I mean, that's great. And you brought up the cross bridge. When you elaborate on the relationship between UMA and the cross bridge, I have a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah, for sure. Can you hear me okay, by the way? It broke up a little bit, but I don't know if that's just my bad reception here.
Oh no, I can hear you fine. It broke up a little bit like before, but I can hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, so Across was built by the same team that built UMA, but it's a separate protocol and it's getting its own DAO, its own token to be managed separately. It was really kind of built partly as a demonstration of what you could build with UMA, the power of it. And as we were designing it, we saw that the benefits were actually really powerful. Like Across is much faster and much cheaper than competing bridges, especially for larger dollar values. Like if you're sending basically more than a couple of ETH, Across really starts pulling away in terms of like how low the fees are. And settlement could be as fast as the same block, and it is sometimes. It just depends on how quickly the relayers will pick something up and advance you the money. So that really the relationship is that Across uses UMA to secure all of these bridging actions and to secure the liquidity pool on L1 that is kind of earning interest, like providing the passive capital to the system, and that a lot of the team members talk with each other a lot. So within Risk Labs, the company where I work, we have a team that's focused just on UMA, a team that's focused just on Across, and a team that's focused just on outcome finance, which is our collection of DAO tools like KPI options and success tokens and the optimistic governor now. So since we've built out these really cool protocols on top of UMA, it makes sense to make them their own separate teams, their own separate, financing, separate DAOs, and make sure that they thrive and aren't just all like, oh, these are like all UMA things. And then that lets UMA focus on just the core oracle that powers all of them. And hopefully there's going to be more external teams that build protocols too. I mean, we have Polymarket, we have Sherlock, we have like Jarvis. There's a lot of like cool third-party protocols building on top of UMA. And we want to encourage more of that. And if we keep on developing ideas like at the level of Across, where we think that, this could be a very successful protocol in itself, then we might just keep on, splitting off additional protocols that use UMA under the hood, but are really clearly differentiated.
That's awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing a full Risk Labs portfolio of usable DApps. So what makes? I mean, you said that Across was like reinforced, like built on UMA and made it, and that's what made it secure. But could you elaborate? I mean, bridges themselves have been, not that great in terms of like being honeypots, I guess, in a sense, to like hackers and so on. So what makes the cross bridge so secure? And do you need to have like LPs on the bridge, or, you know, how does it work like functionally?
Yeah. So basically, how it works is you make a deposit on whatever chain and say, I want this deposit sent to this other address on this other chain, or your own address on this other chain. And then some third party, a relayer, advances you the money out of their own wallet. So they're just over on that other chain. They're maybe doing this professionally, and positioning capital in the right places to deliver these relays and collect a small fee for each relay. That relayer then requests reimbursement from a passive liquidity pool. And they basically say like, hey, here are all the details of the relay. And they submit that as a proposal to UMA's Oracle, like, hey, this relay was done successfully. This relay was valid. If that relay was not valid, it can be disputed and somebody else can perform the relay correctly. So from the user's perspective, if a relayer gets it wrong, the user just gets extra money because the relayer doesn't get the money they advanced back. And it's all single-sided liquidity provision too. Like if you're a passive LP, you just kind of deposit some ETH on L1 and you wait a while and you're kind of collecting LP fees from every relay on every chain because it all gets swept back to L1 eventually to get rebalanced if necessary. And then you pull it back out. And so the Oracle is securing that the relays actually are valid, which protects those LP funds. So we keep an eye on like how big that pot of money is too, and make sure that the cost of corruption for the Oracle itself, like what it would take to mount a successful bribery attack or something on UMA's Oracle, is much greater than the cost, than the like value if you were able to sweep those funds from the LP pool. So that's the basic system.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, bridging is definitely necessary given we're quickly entering a multi-chain world. So, yeah, I mean, it's great to hear. And the second team, or rather, the third team in Risk Labs, Outcome Finance. Could you get into it a little bit more? Like, what is it exactly?
So Outcome is basically a collection of DAO tools that use the Oracle. One really popular one is KPI options, where you can give somebody, you lock up some collateral in a contract, and you issue some tokens to people that will pay out a variable amount depending on some KPI. So a simple example is you want to increase TVL in your protocol. So you give a bunch of these KPI option tokens to people that you think could increase TVL in your protocol and encourage other people to do so. If the TVL hits the target, they get the max payout. If it doesn't hit the target, they might get nothing, or they might get like a little bit less, depending on what the structure is. And UMA's Oracle is going to validate, the proposed answer of like, was the KPI hit, or what was the final TVL, and things like that. That's like one example. We also have success tokens, which are really a variation of KPI options, but they work well as a venture capital vehicle where instead of VCs buying tokens at a discount and then being able to profit by dumping, even if the token goes down, they're buying a token that's a KPI option at face value for the native token, but it has an embedded call option where if the price goes higher by a certain amount, the VC starts to see some upside, and like more and more upside if the token goes up and up and up. So that's more incentive aligned with communities because the VCs want like the 1 out of 10 that's going to really pay off. So they're happy to buy an embedded call option. That's great for their model. But it's great for communities because the VCs don't get a discount if the token's going down. So you still have a chance to maybe thrive without VC dumping. Like there's no profit to the VC there of like selling at this lower value than what they bought it at. So that's kind of a cool one. But a really cool project that's getting added to Outcome Finance is the Optimistic Governor. And that's basically a contract that lets you run a Gnosis safe according to a set of off-chain rules. And that's just published in plain language, like English or whatever language, where you describe how this DAO is supposed to operate, like what kind of transactions can be done and under what circumstances, human readable. And then anybody can propose transactions that follow those rules, and those transactions can then be executed after the challenge window. And the goal there is to, one, provide like executability to snapshot votes, for instance, where a lot of snapshot votes are really just signaling, and then you're like, I hope the multi-sig actually does this. Really get multi-sigs out of the way entirely, and make DAOs centralized and autonomous, that you write some rules anyone can understand. They're not encoded in Solidity, beyond just like the basic mechanism of the optimistic governor. You can read them, you know how it works. You can propose transactions, you can reject transactions, and it's open to anybody to do that. And you're not relying on like a possible attack vector with this multi-sig, or source of friction with a multi-sig too, where people aren't looking at transactions that closely because there's just too many to get done. So that should be really powerful, and I'm really excited about all the ways that can be applied. And again, just like with how a cross can work, because UMA voters and proposers and disputers can just go and look like on Etherscan and see what's happening on different chains. This mechanism works because UMA voters and proposers and disputers can go and look at the rules. They just read the rules. They see whether the transactions are valid or not. So being able to add human reasonableness protects you from like really dumb edge cases where things fail just for like technical reasons or something that you missed in your code. It also lets you be much more expressive in what you're trying to enforce through this decentralized system. So you get the nice benefits of, I guess, civil law of like being able to write in language what you mean, plus this decentralized, totally like neutral third-party system with UMA that makes sure those rules are followed.
Um, that's yeah, okay. That's awesome. And would those make those like would they make I guess DAO governance a little bit more mutable than they've been before? Again, like terrible time, but when Solend did the smart contract upgrade, they had to wait on governance to do that. Is it possible, if it's all written in civil law, for them to do that completely autonomously?
Yeah. So smart contract upgrades are like, a very touchy one where you probably actually want to add some extra stuff in your written rules. You could still do it through the optimistic governor, but you might want to say that one of these specific people should make the proposal just because they understand the system and they're not going to like mess it up somehow, or at least they're taking accountability for it. But you could definitely imagine lots of situations where you have some really straightforward things you want to have. You might be adjusting like a parameter in a smart contract that's lower risk, that it's easy to verify like what the parameter should be at any given time, and then anybody can propose that. And you could even add as part of the rules that that person gets a reward for proposing it, so kind of like a keeper reward. But yeah, you're basically enlisting not only your DAO members, but everybody across the ecosystem an opportunity to be a contributor to your DAO, to fulfill one of the functions of your DAO, including disputing things that are incorrect. So the disputers will always have some incentive to dispute bad proposals because they'll get a cut of that proposer's bond. Which is really great. Like you've got more eyes on it than just what your DAO can provide. So let's say that you have something like this and you have a DAO and it's like 100 people. They might be concentrated in a particular time zone. This gives you this 24/7 coverage of people that are always just like checking out how something works.
All right, great. And so given all this, the optimistic governor, a cross bridge, and just the optimistic oracle in general, how do you view this world and how to benefit from a possible chain future?
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? It broke up a little bit on my end.
So with a cross bridge and with optimistic oracles and optimistic governance, and the fact that we're still steadily approaching what looks like a multi-chain world, how does it benefit from this like multi-chain future?
Well, I think one important part of our system is that because we have this human mediated kind of resolution mechanism, human beings can just look at each chain and see what the truth is. And it's really hard to do secure cross-chain verification in a technical way, but it's incredibly easy to just go on like Etherscan and see what happened. So if you're allowed to do that, it's kind of like a magic mirror to every chain to see what's going on there. So that is a really great aspect of UMA. It's also useful because you can go to chains that you don't even have UMA's Oracle on if you want to have some kind of action happen on Ethereum based on what's going on Solana. People can go and look at what's going on Solana and they can trigger the action. So I think that that's really great. And Across is a really powerful use case of that, where you can see cross-chain bridging is made super easy by proposers and disputers and voters, just being able to go and see what's going on each chain directly. I mean, mainly using bots to do that, but still.
Awesome, awesome. And I mean, yeah, my last question for you, John, is you've been here for a long time, since Bitcoin is worth $50 per token. So you've seen a lot. So what's your advice for building in the bear market? What should builders expect? What should they focus on? And yeah, what do you think is next?
I think that you should just focus on what you want to see exist in the world and what it is that brought you to this in the first place, why you're excited about being in this space, and then try to find what is stopping that future from happening. So I think in the Bitcoin space, Ethereum came out of the Bitcoin ecosystem ultimately, and it was to do certain things that you wanted to see for decentralized economic and social interaction that the Bitcoin network just couldn't support. So you have to do something wildly different. I think there's a lot of work to do on wallets, on usability. I think there's a lot to do in integrating real world assets and real world commerce into blockchain systems. And I think that oracles are really important to that piece of it. So that's something that I'm personally really excited about is the real world, you know, commerce, real world asset side. How do you actually anchor those things to some tokens that you're issuing? Because I think in the long run, it can't just be a snake eating its own tail where you have all these purely digital assets um, feeding on each other. And that's kind of easy to do in a bull market where you're like, we'll mint NFTs, and then we'll fractionalize the NFTs, and then we'll like borrow against that. And, but that only works if all the prices are always going up. In reality, most of the value in terms of interactions between people are happening off chain. And if you want to have a decentralized financial system, a decentralized economic and social layer, you need to pull those things in somehow, and they need to be anchored in a meaningful way and not just based on trusting somebody to act a certain way with this off-chain asset. So those are my biases, but really just like look at your passion, like follow what you actually want to see be different about the way the world works.
I mean, yeah, there's so much scope for looking at the world differently with Web3, crypto, and blockchain. I'm pretty excited. And lastly, sorry, I do have to ask: is UMA actively recruiting? What are you looking for? What kind of positions are you looking to fill? And yeah.
Yeah, we're doing well. So we are still hiring. I think that we've been ratcheting it back a little bit on like aggressiveness, just because we've built out. We've doubled the size of our team over a pretty short period of time. But we are still hiring. We're definitely looking for like high quality engineering candidates, especially. But we have a hiring page too, so there are like product positions that are open, and somebody that really is passionate about what we're doing or like has some ideas, like they're always encouraged to apply. And I think part of maybe the subtext of the question is like, how are we doing during the bear market? And we did a really good job of diversifying our assets. That ex Goldman pedigree helps there. So through the bull market, we've diversified well. We're still growing. We have like a cash cushion to carry us through years if necessary. And because we are launching new protocols like Across and Outcome, there are like other opportunities there around bringing in additional resources. So definitely check out our jobs page. Definitely apply. And even if you're not applying, we do have the UMA DAO that has, I think, like 40 million UMA tokens or something, and they're available for grants for people that are working on projects. I'd love to see more funding proposals coming to the UMA DAO for like UMA relevant things. So if you have like a cool UMA related project or a project that could use an optimistic oracle, which once you like sit down and think about it, most of them probably could in some way, even if it's just some off-chain computation, definitely consider making a funding request and reaching out to us to get help with that.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully we'll see a lot more recruits coming into UMA. And yeah, we'd love to open up the floor to any questions. So if anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, like John, I do have a question for you, just from my end, not as a host, but so how often do answers get disputed with optimistic oracles? Just out of curiosity.
It's pretty rare. So there's really like two categories of answers that'll get disputed. One is like if there's a bot-based system and a bot makes a mistake, and then a different bot disputes them. So that's happened a couple of times with Across V2. We just launched a new version of it that had like direct L2 to L2 transfers. There were a lot of changes in the fee structure. There's a lot going on kind of in the bot ecosystem that people are working on. So you would sometimes see like one bot does a relay slightly incorrectly and makes a proposal, and because they got like some aspect wrong, or for instance they just like missed a deposit for a bundle, so like not even getting a relay wrong, but just getting like the relayer refunds slightly wrong because they missed something that happened on some chain, they'll get disputed then later. So that's one case. So that is not happening as much now. People working on the bots have really shored them up, so they don't accidentally like lose their bonds by making incorrect proposals. The other area where disputes sometimes happen are in prediction markets. So Polymarket uses us for settlement now, and they settle like 25 something markets a day. And these are all just written language questions that are like yes or no answers. And in some cases, the wording of the question or the timing of the answer or some like other aspect of the world is slightly ambiguous, and that can result in a dispute. And those are really interesting because those are legitimate edge cases. So when you're seeing that kind of volume where it's hundreds of markets a week and disputes are maybe like one out of every 300, that's pretty good. And if the dispute is really just about like some ambiguity in the wording and the oracle arrives at a reasonable answer, like the most reasonable answer, I think that's actually a great proof that the system is working. Like people arrive at that Schelling point of a reasonable answer. And then people tighten it up. I mean, people get more careful about their proposals then because they'll lose a bond. So that's been leveling off too. So that's great to see people responding and that those disputes getting rare again. It's also a little bit sad as an UMA voter because that's fewer voting rewards. But overall, I'm happy to see that happening. By the way, I apologize for any background noise. I took this outside. I've been having really spotty internet after like a big fire in my neighborhood, so I don't know if you're hearing a lot of cars driving by or something.
No, it's more than okay. I hope I hope everything's okay. Like from the fire in your neighborhood. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, no, we're getting through it, but thank you.
All right. And again, thanks so much for joining. That's just about the time we have. But from the entirety of NYU Blockchain and FinTech and our friends at BAF, thanks so much for joining us, John. I hope everyone does leave this AMA with a better understanding of optimistic oracles, optimistic governances. I learned a lot over this AMA, and we have a long way to go. I do look forward to seeing what UMA does next. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And anybody that wants to learn more, feel free to just reach out directly. I love to talk to people about different things you can build. Thanks for having me on here.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Akil, do you want to wait maybe 2 minutes for people to collect their thoughts? If they have any questions, just raise your hand or request to speak, and me and Alexis will grant you access. Well, I have a question for John as we wait for people to maybe think of questions. You said you could submit proposals to UMA to do UMA-related projects. Can these projects be education-related? We have NYU Blockchain, a student org at NYU. BAF is a nonprofit that is collaborating with a network of over 50 blockchain clubs around the world. There are so many young people that are building education in Web3, and they're looking for funding. So is that something UMA would be interested in sponsoring or funding?
Yeah, potentially. I also want to make sure to differentiate between like Risk Labs, the company that I work for, and then the UMA DAO. So the UMA DAO, like that big pot of UMA tokens, is controlled by the existing UMA token holders. So basically anything that the community votes and thinks is like a good use case for those UMA tokens, that'll pass through. And that's not in any centralized control or anything. That's just like based on what the UMA token holders think. I do think that it's most likely to succeed if it has a really specific focus on like UMA related use cases, optimistic Oracle use cases. But yeah, I'd love to see proposals along those lines and help to get feedback on them, shore them up so that they'll be able to pass through.
Awesome, that's great. We'll definitely reach out and spread the word in our newsletter and our blockchain club's group chat. I think it's a topic that I personally don't see enough content about. So it would be interesting to do some educational content workshops, maybe something more technical, diving deeper into how the technology works, and engaging students from our partner clubs. I see no one raised their hand for questions. Feel free
Oh,
to ask questions
I
on our Discord. Yes,
I do
sorry.
have one comment too. I know we're looking to do some user interviews where basically we're not thrilled with all of our technical documentation right now, and we'd love to sit down with people that have never read the UMA docs before, and just kind of shoulder surf for like an hour as they like read through it and like try to spin something up and see like where the gaps are. So that's one easy area that I know like we would give out like 100 UMA tokens or something for like an hour of somebody's time if they have like some solidity, familiarity, and they're up for just, doing that for an hour with us. That's not like a full-on grant or anything, but just throwing it out there because it sounds like, if some people are interested in exploring this, that could be a good way to start out. And then after that hour of doing it on your own, then we would actually like help to build the thing that you want to build. We just want to get that like honest feedback of people that have never seen it and aren't getting any help first too.
Awesome, that sounds great. Well, we love ending our Twitter spaces with a clear call to action for students to engage in a ecosystem or a project. So if you could send us all of those documents or any action plan that you have, we'll drop it on our Discord and our newsletter. But yeah, to wrap this up, awesome job, Akil. Thank you so much for moderating today. And thank you, John, for sharing all your knowledge. I also learned so much, and I also have questions to pursue after this Twitter space. I'll make sure to share the recording of the Twitter space on our social media channels. We also have a YouTube channel with over 1,000 subscribers. For anyone who missed the Twitter space, you'll be able to listen to it after. And yeah, if you guys are curious about BAF, feel free to check out our Twitter account. You'll find our website. All you have to do is fill out a 4-minute type form, and you would join our private Discord with a lot of resources, people looking for jobs, people posting opportunities and resources, and we'll drop all of the opportunities and resources mentioned today there for you guys to check out. This was great. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another awesome Twitter space with students and industry experts. And again, thank you so much, John, for giving us your time today.
Yeah, thanks so much.